A girl is standing in front of the most powerful man on earth, and she is telling him how she would kill his horse. She is maybe 15, a nobody, a junior concubine, near the bottom of a palace full of women kept for one man, the Emperor Taizong of the Tang. He has a stallion no one in the empire can break. The best trainers have failed. And half as a joke, he asks the room who thinks they could tame it. This girl steps forward. "Give me 3 things," she says. "An iron whip, an iron mace and a dagger. I'll whip it. If the whip doesn't work, I'll beat it with the mace. And if it still won't submit," she doesn't blink, "I'll cut its throat." The room goes silent, because everyone just understood that she was not really talking about a horse. That girl was named Wu Zhao, and the men in that palace had her filed under one word: May, the charming one, a pretty thing out of a song. They thought they knew exactly what she was. Every one of them was wrong, and almost none of them would live long enough to find out how wrong. Because that junior concubine, a piece of furniture with a face, one of 100, walked out of that world 50 years later as the only female emperor in 3,000 years of Chinese history. Not empress, not regent, not the wife of a king or the mother of one. Emperor. The title no woman had ever worn, written on the decree in a brand new character she invented for herself, because the old words couldn't hold her. To get there, she would be widowed, have her head shaved, and be locked inside a convent to vanish forever. She would claw her way back out. She would build a machine that let any peasant in China accuse anyone, and watch it turn around and execute the man who built it. And at the very end, she would leave behind a stone the size of a house, carved and polished to carry the story of her reign, and order it left blank. Not one word. 1,300 years later, that stone is still empty, and it is still arguing with us. This is Wu Zetian. One thing before we start. Everything here comes from the people who kept the records, the official Tang histories, the court chronicles. The catch, every one of them was written by men who thought a woman on that throne was a wound in nature. So we'll do the thing they wouldn't. We'll separate what she did from what they felt about it. Because here's the trick she pulled. She beat them at their own game so completely that they spent the next 1,000 years trying to erase her from it. And they still couldn't. One thing before we start. Everything here comes from the people who kept the records, the official Tang histories, the court chronicles. The catch, every one of them was written by men who thought a woman on that throne was a wound in nature. So we'll do the thing they wouldn't. We'll separate what she did from what they felt about it. Because here's the trick she pulled. She beat them at their own game so completely that they spent the next 1,000 years trying to erase her from it, and they still couldn't. To understand what Wu Zetian survived, you have to understand the room she was standing in. The Tang imperial harem was not a romance, it was a holding pen. Hundreds of women, ranked and numbered like inventory, kept for one man. Wu Zhao, that was her real name, arrived around the year 638, at 13, as a 5th-rank consort. Near the bottom. Her job was to be available and to be quiet. She was neither. You already met her, the girl who told an emperor she'd take a dagger to his horse. That wasn't bravado. That was a warning, and nobody in the room was smart enough to hear it. She could read and write at a time when almost no woman could. She had a memory that unsettled people, and she watched. She spent years near the top of that palace, studying exactly how power moved through it, who rose, who vanished, and what it cost. Then the emperor she served started to die, and the trap she'd been standing in the whole time finally closed. When an emperor dies, his childless concubines don't go home. They go to a convent, heads shaved, names taken, locked behind a wall to pray until they die. That's the rule. That's the only door out, and it leads nowhere. In 649, Taizong dies, and they come for her. Picture it. You're 24. Someone takes the blade to your scalp, and your hair falls to the floor, and with it goes your name, your rank, your face in the world. They put the robes on you, They walk you to the Ganyi Convent. The gate closes. That's it. You're done. One more erased woman in a cold temple, praying into the dark, forgotten before you're even old. This is where the story should end. This is where it ended for every other woman who walked through that gate. Maybe you've heard of her, the villain version, the seductress, the poisoner, the mother who smothered her own baby to frame a rival. That's the one that survived. But set that version next to where she's actually standing right now. A shaved head, a cold temple, 24 years old and erased. Everything she becomes from here. She had one thread to pull. Before the old emperor died, his son had noticed her, the crown prince, Li Ji, and now the old man is dead, and the son is the new emperor, Gao Zong. Watch what she does with that thread. The convent was built to make her vanish. She turns it into a door. Within a few years, she's out of the temple, back inside the palace, and not as anybody's leftover. As the new emperor's favourite, they built a hole to bury her in. She climbed out of it. By 655, she's destroyed the sitting empress and taken the title for herself, Empress Consort, numbered concubine to shaved bald nun, to the second most powerful person in the empire in 6 years. She was just getting started. In 660, the Emperor Gaozong had a stroke, headaches, failing eyesight, a man who can't read his own documents anymore. So the paperwork starts going to someone else. The old history of the Tang catches it happening. Officials walk in with state business, and the Emperor asks them one thing first. "Have you run this by the Empress? What does she say?" This isn't a coup. Nobody grabs anything. They hand her the work because she's the one who can do it. For 20 years, a sick man holds the title, and Wu runs the empire. Reads the petitions, signs the orders. Then in 683, Gaozong die, and the title and the power come apart in her hands. So she sets out to close the gap. She put one son on the throne, deposed him in 6 weeks, put up another, pushed him aside too, and then she did something no one had a category for. In 686, she bolted 4 bronze boxes to the wall outside the palace. Picture them. Cast bronze, one body split into 4 chambers. Each one faces a different direction, each one a different colour, and on top of each, a narrow slot, built so paper goes in and never comes back out. Anyone in the empire can walk up and drop a message straight to the throne. No official in between. No one to read your name and decide you're not worth hearing. 3 of those boxes were a gift to the powerless. One was for praise, one for grievances, for a peasant wronged by a magistrate with nowhere else to turn, one for criticism of the government, to the ruler's own face. If you've ever filed a complaint with a government office and gotten a tracking number, you've met the great-grandchild of what she built. In the 7th century, she invented the open channel, but the 4th box was black, and the 4th box took accusations. Now watch the same machine turn. An anonymous note, no signature, dropped through a slot straight to a ruler who knew the old families wanted her dead. And they did. So she rewards it. You report a plot, you get promoted. You inform on a neighbour, the state feeds you and houses you while you do it. And a whole trade grows up around that black box. Professional accusers and the men who process what they bring in. Torturers. Their names become curses. One of them, Lai Junchen, is said to have co-written a handbook. How to break a man. How to take one accusation and spin it into a net that hangs his entire family beside him. So officials start saying goodbye to their families every morning, before court, not sure they're coming home. That's not a chronicler reaching for drama. That's what a room turns into when anyone can erase anyone, with a slip of paper and no name on it. She didn't invent cruelty. Every emperor before her killed rivals. What she did was worse and colder. She turned it into paperwork, a form, a Dropbox, a reward schedule, a department. The terror had a filing system. That's not the medieval part of this story. That's the part you recognize. And now the detail you'll be repeating to someone by the end of the week. The man who designed those boxes was named Wu Zetian, a maker of things, an engineer before the word existed. He had no patience for the slow grind of the exams, so when the Empress wanted a way to hear everything in her empire, he built her the perfect machine and handed it over. It worked. She rewarded him. Office, money, a seat near the top. He'd won. Then one morning, a slip of paper goes into one of his own boxes. No signature, and it's about him. 2 years back, a general named Shu Jingye raised an army against the Empress, and the note says Wu Zetian armed him, that he forged the blades and the crossbows that killed her soldiers. They investigate. It's true. And the machine does to its maker exactly what it was built to do to everyone else. They drag him into the street. They execute him. Killed by a faceless note, dropped through the slot he designed to carry faceless notes. The first man the informer's box destroyed was the man who built the informer's box. You couldn't write that. It's too neat. But the Tang record set it down flat. No drama, almost a footnote. And that flatness is the whole horror. To the men keeping the books, a machine eating its own maker wasn't tragedy and wasn't irony. It was Tuesday. There's even a phrase for what happened to him. Spinning a cocoon and trapping yourself inside it. He built the trap. He furnished it. He walked through the door first. So what does that tell you about the thing she'd made? It had no loyalties. It didn't care who fed it. It just ran. In 690, Wu Zetian did the thing that should have been impossible. She didn't rule through a sun. She didn't hide behind a curtain. She wiped the Tang dynasty off the map, declared a new one, the Zhou, named for an ancient line she claimed as her own blood, and took the throne herself. Not empress, not dowager, Huangdi, emperor. There was no script for this. 3,000 years and not one woman had ever held that title in her own right. No precedent, no permission. So she manufactures her own. She has texts circulated saying a female ruler was prophesied. She wraps herself in Buddhism, makes herself a divine sovereign, because the old Confucian order has no slot for her at all, so she steps outside it. And then she does the strangest thing. She reaches into the written language and invents new characters, brand new words by imperial decree. One of them is a new character for her own name, Zhao. The sun and the moon together over the sky. Read that again. She was so far past what the world thought a woman could be that the existing words couldn't hold her. So she made new ones. She was past 60 years old, a former concubine, a former nun, a woman the system had tried to erase twice, and she was now, by her own decree, the holy and divine Emperor of China. She would hold it for 15 years. And here's the part that the Villains and Poisoners version never tells you. She was good at it, not gentle, good. She cut the taxes, crushing the peasants. She built. And she pulled talent up from the bottom, threw the exams wide open. So the smartest poor kid in some backwater county finally had a road to the top, one the great families couldn't block. Even Sima Guang couldn't hide it, the historian who, 400 years later, would write her into his chronicle as a warning to all mankind. Listen to him try to damn her and fail. She was observant. She had good judgment. You can hear his teeth grinding. So the talented people of the time were willing to be used by her. When your prosecutor accidentally testifies for the defense, you pay attention. To the great families at court, she was a reign of terror. To the farmer in the field, far from the black box, hers was a good time to be alive. Both things are true. That's the knot at the centre of her. And anyone who hands you only one half is selling you a version. By 705, the magic was running out. She was past 80, sick, and she'd made the one mistake she'd spent 50 years never making. She'd let two favourites get close enough to wall her off from everyone else. Two brothers, the Jiangs, beautiful and hated, controlling who reached the old emperor and who didn't. The court despised them, and through them, it began to despise her. February. The Chancellor Zhang Jianji pulls together a group of officials and palace guards, and they do the exact thing her informers were built to stop. They move. They come into the palace, they cut down the Zhang brothers, and then they walk to the bed of the woman who's ruled them for half a century, and tell her it's finished. Picture it. 50 years of reading every room better than anyone alive. 50 years of knowing, before anyone else, which way the wind would turn. And now she's an old woman in a sick bed, and the room has finally turned against her, and there is nothing left to outmaneuver. She had spent her whole life refusing to disappear. This time she couldn't stop it. She gave up the throne. Her son was put back on it. The Tang dynasty resumed, and the historians exhaled and filed her entire reign as an interruption. A parenthesis, an aberration in the proper line of men. She died 9 months later, and you might think that's the end. The usurper falls, the natural order snaps back. The men who restored it ride off as heroes. It wasn't the end. Watch what happened to the men who took her down. The Chancellor Zhang Jianji and the officials who stormed the palace, the heroes of the story, the ones who put the rightful dynasty back, did not win. Within 2 years, nearly all of them were destroyed, and the thing that destroyed them was her court. Her own nephew, Wu Zetian, rode out the whole transition, got close to the new emperor through the emperor's wife, and turned the machinery of accusation back on the men who'd overthrown his aunt. One by one, stripped of rank, exiled to the far provinces, killed some of them slowly. The men who tore Wu Zetian down got swallowed by the exact kind of court she'd built. Denunciation, favour, the knife in the dark. She lost the throne. Her methods kept ruling without her. And then there's the other thing they couldn't kill. They wanted her erased, a mistake the dynasty had fixed, but the doors she'd kicked open didn't swing shut. The exams she'd thrown wide didn't narrow back. The idea she'd forced into the machine, that a man with no family name could rise on merit alone, outlived her. It ran straight through the Song dynasty that came next, and it became one of the deepest grooves in how China ran itself for the next 1,000 years. The men who overthrew her kept the half of her that opened the door. They only smashed the half that watched it. They thought they were deleting her. They were editing her down to her best idea. But the strangest thing she left behind isn't the exam halls, or the bureaucracy, or the terror. It's a single stone. At Qianling, the mountain tomb where she was finally buried beside the husband she'd outlived by 22 years, 2 great stone tablets stand at the gate. The one on the west belongs to Gaozong. It's covered in characters, thousands of them, an inscription Wu wrote herself, praising her dead husband, every letter once packed with gold dust. It has plenty to say. The one on the east is hers. It stands over 8 meters tall. The body is a single block of stone, more than 6 meters high, carved and polished, crowned with coiling dragons. It weighs close to 100 tons, and it was raised for one job, to carry the record of her reign. The achievements, the titles, the verdict of history cut into stone forever. It is blank, not broken, not worn smooth by weather. Blank on purpose. The most famous wordless monument in China, raised for the only woman who ever ruled it in her own name. And the surface where her life story should be was left completely empty. The characters you can see scratched on it now were added centuries later by tourists. Graffiti on a silence. The medieval version of I was here, and nobody knows why she did it. Some say pride, that her deeds were too big for any words to hold. Some say guilt, a last refusal to defend a life she couldn't justify. And some say it wasn't her call at all, that her son stood in front of that stone, chisel ready, and froze, because there was no word in the language for a mother who had been an emperor, so he wrote nothing, and that silence is the loudest thing she ever did. The woman who controlled everything for 50 years, who rewrote the language so it could hold her name, who built a machine to hear every voice in the empire. She left the one surface that mattered most, dead silent. Every other ruler in that valley filled their stone with the story they wanted you to believe. She left the verdict open, and so for 1300 years, every single person who stands in front of that blank stone has to do the one thing a finished inscription would have spared them. They have to judge her themselves. They tried to erase her in the convent. She came back. They tried to bury her in a sickbed. Her methods ruled without her. They tried to delete her from the dynasty. She survived as its best idea, and at the very end, handed the chance to tell history exactly what to think of her. The most calculating ruler China ever produced did the most dangerous thing of all. She said nothing, and she made history flinch first. A slave girl they named Charming, a nun they shaved and forgot, an emperor whose own tombstone is afraid to describe her. They wrote her down as a warning. The stone she left writes nothing and asks the harder question. A warning against what?